Hello, gentlemen. We're running a little bit short on class time, and so instead of going over this in class together, I figured I could provide this video to you. When we started this unit on Catholic social teaching, one of the activities that we did was that timeline activity, where you and your teammates worked together trying to identify, based on descriptions of historical situations and based on descriptions of church documents, which church document, which Catholic social teaching document grew out of which historical scenario. And the point behind that was to emphasize the fact that in order to be faithful to the gospel, individual Christians and the universal church as a whole must promote the common good by responding to real situations in which people and societies find themselves. And that's all well and good, but we never really define the common good. And so I want to take advantage of this video in an effort to help us establish a little bit more sophisticated understanding of what the common good actually is. And so to rewind a little bit, if you remember back in our natural law unit, we discussed some basic human goods. Human goods, or especially intrinsic human goods, are those aspects of life that are in line with our human nature. And so in order to live a fully human life, we have to have those goods. Now, we can divide those human goods into common goods and private goods. Private goods are those goods which can exist within each individual and that they do not have to be shared. To give an example, intellect, my intellectual development, that is a good, that's a vital part of who I am. But I can develop my intellect even without sharing that development with somebody else. Okay, so if Johnny and Bobby are both in school, and Johnny is really devoted to his studies and he's curious, and Bobby is asleep, Johnny can still develop that good even if Bobby does not. So that would be a private good. Other examples of private goods would be physical fitness. I can develop my level of physical fitness even if somebody else does not. Or think of another example like pleasure. Specifically think of like the pleasure that's involved in eating something that's delicious. I can eat that steak and I can enjoy that even if the person that I'm with maybe doesn't really like steak. My enjoyment of that good is not dependent upon that good being shared. Common goods, on the other hand, are goods that can exist only when they are shared. And so examples, I think, flesh this out a little bit. Examples would include friendship. I can't enjoy the good of friendship if that good is not shared. I need a friend in order to have a friendship. Discussion is another common good. You can't really have a discussion with myself. That would just simply be a monologue. But discussing with others, that is kind of part of the human experience. It's a shared good. Or even you expand this out, life in society. As we talked about, that's part of our God-given nature to live in communion with others. And so our civic lives, being a part of a society cannot exist unless it is shared. Now we could go into more specifics in terms of extrinsic versus intrinsic goods. I'm not necessarily going to go into that distinction, but what is important to note is that intrinsic common goods take priority over private goods. And the reason for that is that intrinsic common goods are vital to the good of each individual and the good of the whole. And so when we're thinking about priorities in terms of morality, we always have to keep an eye on what is good for the entire community, what is good for all. All right, all of us has an obligation to work for and to promote the common good. And finally, to give you just more of a tangible example of what this looks like in practice, what you have here is an address from Pope Francis from about a year and a half ago. And in this situation, he kind of vocalizes how he has witnessed citizens of Rome contributing to the common good. And there are certainly ambitious ways to do this, but he takes note of things like driving and observing the rules of traffic, kind of being a member of society that is mindful of how he participates in that society, not just for his own good, but for the good of the whole. So if you want an example, take time to read this slide. If you have any questions, please let me know.